Hello everyone, welcome to episode 10 of the Ecocide report for Stop Ecocide International. We have incredible news this week. There have been lots of new developments. I'm here with my very good friend Jojo in her garden. Jojo, how are we?
Yes, indeed. Here we are in the garden that I feel like running around because the news is so exciting. So just last week, on the 9th of September 2024, 3 Pacific small island states, Vanuatu, Fiji and Samoa, formally proposed an amendment to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court to include a crime of ecocide. I'm just going to let that land for a moment internally for the audience. This is an incredible milestone. What it means is that the formal diplomatic conversation at the level of the International Criminal Court is now open. Obviously, Vanuatu has been a leader in this space for many years. They were the first to mention it in their government statement during the assembly of the International Criminal Court, the ICC, back in 2019. At that stage, it was a suggestion for member states to consider the addition of ecocide to the Rome Statute. And 5 short years later, here we are with a formal proposal, and that formal proposal is based on the independent expert panel's definition that has been, as we know, circulating around the world and in the political and diplomatic world now since 2021. It's stood the test of time in terms of its influence on national and regional proposals, and now it's been put forward as the proposed amendment. So this is an extraordinary moment in this work and in the journey to make ecocide an international crime.
It's amazing. Those 3 islands, of course, have been on the forefront of a lot of change, and the fact that they're putting together this amendment in this particular format, in this global fora, I think adds that little bit of extra urgency, if you like, to the processes surrounding the adoption of the new statute to the Rome Treaty that regards ecocide. Have there been things about the announcement that are going to yield immediate results that you want to alert people to, things to look forward to?
I think the most important thing about this incredibly key move, if you like, on the part of these states is very much about the opening of a diplomatic conversation. There is no expectation of an immediate vote. That is actually not the point initially. What this does is it officially opens the conversation. It means that all member states of the ICC effectively are now obliged to take it seriously, encouraged to join in that conversation, so that those negotiations, those discussions can get going. And I think what Vanuatu has made very clear is that what they believe is that this is a very important conversation. It's one that's been growing internationally through both national and regional developments, and it's one that's now being taken very seriously. And what they're ensuring by doing this is that other players, including larger players who might not be first movers, now have reason and just, on a certain level, obligation to join that conversation. We don't know exactly how fast that conversation will move. We know that when the crime of aggression was being discussed, it took many years, but we also know that with the current situation as it is in terms of ecological destruction on the planet, in terms of the exacerbation of climate change by damage to climate regulating ecosystems, the situation that we're in is one that demands immediate attention and that quite clearly affects the international community as a whole, which is of course what the Rome Statute is designed to deal with, those crimes that most affect the international community as a whole. So there is hope that this conversation could proceed well and proceed thoroughly without it necessarily being drawn out over a decade.
Well, you heard it here first. In terms of next steps, in terms of next announcements, stay tuned. But I think it's an amazing milestone. It's definitely worth celebrating given all the work it's taken to get to this particular point.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this has been an extraordinary roller coaster of developments, I guess, over the years. And as I say, Vanuatu has been very much a leader in this. They've very much been sort of welcomed a kind of allyship and, helped, if you like, to bring this conversation to a level where states were already taking it seriously. The legal and academic world has already been taking it seriously. And it also, in a sense, slightly reframes what Stop Ecocide International is doing. We're providing a kind of, I suppose, an advisory role. We often get invited to brief at quite high level on the developments on ecocide law. So it feels like there's a real kind of active sense of assisting with the development of what happens now, what happens from here on.
Excellent. So the next item on the agenda we wanted to talk about was an Ipsos survey that was done. I don't know the details.
Yes, no, I mean, it's actually remarkable, the timing of all of this, because literally just a few days before the amendment was put forward in the working group on amendments for the ICC, just a few days prior to that, a survey was released done by Ipsos, the world-renowned sort of research organisation. And it was a piece of research, it was called the Global Commons Survey, and it was commissioned by Earth for All and the Global Commons Alliance. Mm-hmm. And it took place across all the G20 countries, except for Russia, I think, where there were safety considerations, but and with the addition of a few other countries. So I think it was 22 or 23 countries altogether that this was surveyed. Well over 20,000 respondents. And there was an average across all of those countries of 72% of the public who believed that ecocide should be a crime. Now, the question that was asked, it didn't actually include the word ecocide, but it was ecocide in all but the word. It was, do you agree or disagree with a statement that went something like this? It should be a criminal offence for big business leaders and senior government officials to approve or permit actions that they know may lead to severe environmental destruction. I'm paraphrasing very slightly, but that was the gist. And to have such a strong, almost 3/4 of respondents agreeing that this should be something dealt with in criminal law is hugely encouraging. I mean, we had sort of, in a sense, we already knew that this conversation was at a stage where the legislative developments were actually quite far ahead of public awareness globally. I mean, that's still the case at the moment. But what was really sort of great to see in these results was that even at kind of first pass, at just throwing this question out as part of a survey, the response was so positive already in this direction. And I think there was a strong awareness amongst respondents, and you can see this from the overall survey results, that government and business have a particular responsibility to act in regard to climate and ecological damage, and that was very clear. And in fact, the ecocide question, as we've been obviously calling it internally, had one of the strongest responses of the whole survey. So I think it's encouraging to see that appetite is there, but it's also clear that people are understanding that it's not just about what the end user, consumer, citizen, in fact, we would say, the choices that we make as ordinary people. It really matters what the decisions are at the top level that have the biggest society-wide effects.
100%. No, I can see that. I think that the challenge between whether you're going for a top-down or a bottom-up approach is always iterated through this whole idea of what's the nexus of decision-making process. Is it being imposed on people? Are people pushing the policymakers enough? But this is incredible validation that all of these citizens across this global span feel really strongly about this. That's excellent news. Well, I know we're supposed to talk about sort of a People's Pact later on in the programme, but I don't know enough about it actually. Did you want to?
It's actually kind of related really to this point, so I understand why you bring it up now. And over the summer, there was a document put together called the People's Pact for the Future. And if you like, it's a kind of civil society counterpart to the Pact for the Future, which is a state-level document that is intended to emerge from the Summit of the Future. Now, the Summit of the Future is a UN summit that was called by the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and is going to take place later this month. And in fact, this aspect of it is something that is often invited in UN conferences, to have a civil society document that is produced in parallel. And in this case, in the People's Pact for the Future, ecocide law was called for in two different sections of that. So both the section that dealt with kind of global governance, but also the section that deals with international peace and security. So there's a clear sense that, again, that civil society is recognising that this is an important framework to put in place, to have these kind of outer boundaries in place to steer decision making if we're going to be able to move forward to a safe future.
That's outstanding. So if this is potentially taking place next month at the UN General Assembly, does it overlap with New York Climate Week in any way?
It's a good point. In fact, it's actually this month. So UN General Assembly, Summit of the Future, and also New York Climate Week all happen in New York in actually less than a week's time. This all sort of starts happening. So we will have representation in New York for some of these events that go on during Climate Week, which is almost like a kind of a festival of events around environment and climate. And we will also be involved in side events around Summit of the Future, UN General Assembly in various ways. We're also putting on one of our own events alongside Global Legal Pact, and that is going to be in Brooklyn on the 25th, which is the Wednesday, and that's themed around outer space, interestingly. One aspect of the definition of ecocide law is that the environment also includes outer space, includes the main spheres on Earth, but also outer space. And that's actually quite relevant because there's some very rapid developments happening in space right now in terms of commodification, militarization, in terms of exploration, and framing that in a safe way is really something that needs to be thought about now. And it was one of the interesting conversations actually that in one of the discussions I attended at Davos at the beginning of this year, where key spokespeople in that arena were saying, let's not make the mistake we made with climate and environment by failing to put the right frameworks in place in time. So this is actually the right moment to enter that conversation as far as ecocide law is concerned. So that's going to be a fascinating event.
That's amazing. So thinking of that bridge between terrestrial ecocide and atmospheric ecocide, and as you mentioned, challenges with making sure everything's coherent. Let's just come down slightly more local, because I know that London Fashion Week just happened, and as you arrive in New York, you're taking your the One Dress Planet show with you, because I think we do need a little bit of levity. And it would be nice to have that. How's that going?
Yeah, it's true. I think something that can kind of both raise the spirits and raise awareness at the same time, I think is really a sort of key aspect of the project you mentioned, which is a collaboration between Stop Ecocide International and eco-couture designer Lucy Tammam with her house, if you like, her couture house, Atelier Tammam. She's been working on this sort of, I suppose you could call it a sort of statement piece, almost an art piece, actually, fashion-wise, over the last 2 seasons. And it was launched at a catwalk show in London Fashion Week last week, and will be coming with us, with a model and with a designer, to New York for a few days to create visibility and raise awareness. And it's an extraordinary piece of work. It's this bodice that is embroidered with these incredible artisan embroideries of endangered flowers, so flowers from endangered biomes. And people have been able to sponsor these embroideries. So in other words, sort of in a sense, own a little part of this collaborative piece that is not about selling a collection of clothes and, overconsumption, all of these things that go with that whole, the whole fast fashion thing that we know is going on in the world. But it's also a little bit different from other couture collections in the sense that it's not a collection as such, it's a particular statement piece. And the skirt is beautiful. It's almost like a book. It has these kind of almost these white pages that you can turn and that are printed with something called air ink, which is actually made of particulate pollution, distilled and made into ink. Oh, wow. And it's got sort of words from the Ecocide definition on it. So, it's a whole kind of, it's an awareness raising piece, and it's beautiful. So that will be with us in New York as well.
It's amazing, demonstrative and rich. That's really, really nice. Again, a little bit more local, but not necessarily for London. The French Development Agency made some new developments that you wanted to talk about.
This is true. This is another kind of national level sort of echo of the importance of the whole discussion of ecocide that is starting to pop up in so many places. So as we know, I mean, actually Emmanuel Macron was one of the first heads of state to say that he thought ecocide should be an international crime. This was back in 2020, I believe. But what we've seen recently is that the French Development Agency has particularly praised the developments in the EU, the Environmental Crime Directive, and very specifically said that this lays the foundation for ecocide law, and that actually this development of ecocide law is going to be a key lever for healthy economic development into the future. And I think we're starting to see these kind of connections being made between ecocide law and sustainable or healthy economic development, investment, these kinds of things. So it's another one of these kind of bridging pieces for it to have come from the development agency, which obviously concerns itself largely with finance.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, in the light of this particular victory from the small island states, I think this illuminates a whole new potential dimension for this year's biodiversity COP16, which is being held for the first time in Colombia, in the Global South, which is an amazing country with incredible biomes that will be showcasing that. I know you're having a side event.
Indeed, we are going to be involved in several official side events for COP16 of the Convention on Biological Diversity in Cali, in Colombia. There'll be a Blue Zone event, which is the political section, if you like, of the conference, and that will be themed around ecocide law and the relationship with business and civil society. There will also be 2 Green Zone events, which is the kind of the sort of cultural civil society zone, and those will be one is being put on by our Latin American team, and the other by the local Colombian team, Colombia Sin Ecocidio. So there's some strong involvement there. The One Dress Planet will also be coming with us to Colombia. And we also anticipate sort of collaborations with other NGOs. And obviously what we would ultimately hope for is that at state level, what would be ideal would be some kind of inclusion or nod, if you like, to the importance of criminal law to support the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. I mean, obviously, that context is not about criminal law, but perhaps an acknowledgement of the support of that and the relevance of that would be absolutely timely and useful.
100%. No, I think the Colombians would score a major win if they both had the double of hosting CBD COP and ratifying it locally, or at least involving themselves more deeply in the debate. There's something else. It's sort of one parliament. Is there Ecocide Parliament? It's an alliance that you have going for the 1st of October. What's that about?
Well, that is actually, it's being organised by the Ecocide Alliance, which is an alliance of parliamentarians globally for in support of ecocide law. So elected parliamentarians around the world. And particularly in the context of these developments, obviously we're working together with the Ecocide Alliance to promote a kind of, if you like, a sort of briefing and an informational session there'll actually be 3 over the coming months, but the first one, they're going to be in different languages. So the first one will be in English, then there's going to be one in French, one in Spanish. This first one is the English one, and that's going to be on the 1st of October. And a number of key speakers that have been involved in a parliamentarian context, both in Europe and in specific jurisdictions. And it's aimed specifically at MPs, at parliamentarians around the world to come and find out more about, how people have taken this forward in particular ways and how they can potentially do that themselves in their own parliaments.
Interesting. Today's program has been an incredible tour de force. Okay, it's episode 10, nice round number, but we've had victories in terms of international ratification with small island states, proposing amendments to the Ecocide Statute as it stands, as an update of the Rome Statute. We've had London Fashion Week, we have New York Climate Week, we have COP16. I mean, there's just, event after event after event. The pace is breathtaking, but I don't want to miss out on the update on the songbook.
Oh, bless you for asking. I've actually got a copy here. It's like, on the telly when they say, here's one I made earlier. This beautiful book, which is an illustrated songbook of my dear mother's songs. So perhaps some of the original threads that led me to this work. But it's a stunning piece of work, particularly by illustrator Stu McClellan, and I'll come back to him in a minute. But first, I just want to say to Chidi, this copy is for you as a very small thank you for all the work you've done with us on the Ecocide report. And it's lovely to bring the illustration into the conversation, because one of the other things that has happened also very recently, courtesy of, in part to Stu McClellan, the illustrator here, is that we've Stop Ecocide International has had a bit of a rebrand, and some of you may have already seen this online. If you go to stopecocide.earth, you'll see our new look, if you like, and here it is. Here is our new postcards, and I'm loving my new business card, which still, of course, has the definition fitting on the back of it, like it's always had. But this, in a sense, it feels like a kind of a next level of the presence of Stop Ecocide. There's something, in a sense, there's a kind of graduation, I guess, to another level, something that feels perhaps less confrontational, more welcoming. It's very much about, this whole law is very much about the protection of the living world, and in, now and into the future, and of all species, including our own. And that means including everybody, 100%. Even those people we don't agree with and that we really potentially want to listen to this. We want them too to come into the future safely with us. And so there's something of that feeling around this rebrand. And I think it's really super important, because this is now going to be reaching out even wider and moving forward even faster. So it just feels like that, reflecting that with something both beautiful and also serious is really important. I mean, people need to find us and realise, how incredibly sort of embedded already this conversation is at the legislative level, how not only is it safe to engage with, but it's actually about all of our safety. And that feels like a really beautiful thing to be putting across.
100%. May I see the card? Because I think without being too literal about it, it has a swift on it, which I think, nominally at least, says a lot about the pace at which Ecocide has moved. But I think, ending on this particular tack, the journey has been so incredible over the past sort of half a decade or decade, and to think that we're at the point where we are debating at global level, nation states putting in amendments, rationalizing how they would implement Ecocide, not just at the global level, but also in individual parliaments. It's a great milestone. It's a great way of thinking about what can happen next.
Thank you.
As we progress on episode 10, given the tumultuous events of the last few weeks and the excitement to come in the weeks before us, are there specific calls to action you wanted to make to our audience?
There are always calls to action. Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of what we've just said, there's a sense of just pick it up, share it. There's plenty of information now in terms of there's press around the amendment. There are events listed on our website. Come and, if you're in New York, come and join us. All of those kinds of things. Also, the songbook will be available shortly to purchase from the website. And in fact, we're going to be sort of expanding to potentially offer other kinds of things as well, whether that's eco t-shirts, whether that's other aspects of reflecting the beautiful new look and the message, which will be fantastic. So keep your eyes peeled for those. I would also say, actually, this is a real moment. If you are thinking about where you can put significant funds that will make a really serious impact on the planet at this time, this initiative is one such. I mean, we can see the inflection point that we've reached. And this is really a moment to scale up and a moment to seize, certainly not a moment to seize up for lack of resources, to actually expand. And it would be really great to see funders as well. Hello, stepping up. Because there is so much to do now to really have this run in the way that it needs to. Political research, legal research, support and advice, and all of these things that we already know how to do. We really know how to do this and how to scale it. So if anyone watching this is in a position to assist with us doing that, now is your moment. Get in touch.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks very much.